Her touch was fatal, until a human dared to hold her close. The warning sirens echoed through New Haven Colony as another transport ship prepared to depart. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the observation deck as families said their final goodbyes to loved ones who had been exposed to the Nethari. The purple-skinned aliens had arrived on Earth 3 months ago, seeking refuge from their dying homeworld. What humanity didn't know was that their very touch carried a deadly toxin that could kill any human within hours. Jake's younger brother Tom had been one of the first casualties. A simple handshake with a Nethari diplomat during the welcome ceremony had sealed his fate. The alien toxin worked slowly, shutting down human organs, one by one until nothing remained but painful memories and empty spaces at dinner tables. Now the Nethari lived in isolation on Colony Station Omega, a massive space station orbiting Jupiter. No human was allowed within 1,000 kilometers of their settlement. The Galactic Treaty was clear. Any human who made contact with a Nethari would be immediately quarantined and left to die. It was the price of peace between the species. But Jake couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen in the Nethari ambassador's eyes during that fatal handshake with Tom. It wasn't malice or indifference. It was pure, devastating sorrow. The ambassador had known what would happen, and the knowledge had broken something inside her. Her name was Varasalanthus, and she was the youngest member of the Nethari Council. Jake had studied every piece of footage from the first contact meetings, memorizing her delicate features and the way her silver hair caught the light. She moved with a grace that seemed almost supernatural, but there was always sadness in her violet eyes. A sadness that spoke of countless losses and the weight of being untouchable. The more Jake learned about Vera, the more he realized she was nothing like the cold, alien creatures portrayed in the media. She had fought tirelessly to find a solution to the toxin problem, working with human scientists until the government banned all collaboration. She had wept openly when the quarantine was announced, knowing it meant eternal separation from the very people she desperately wanted to help. Jake's commanding officer, General Patricia Hawthorne, noticed his obsession with the Nethari situation. She assigned him to routine patrol duty in the outer solar system, hoping distance would cure his fixation. Instead, it gave him the perfect opportunity to study Colony Station Omega from afar, through his ship's long-range sensors. Jake watched the Nethari go about their daily lives. They had built a beautiful city within the station, with flowing architecture that seemed to pulse with organic life. Gardens grew in impossible spirals along the walls, and crystalline spires reached toward the stars like frozen songs. But it was Vera who captured his attention completely. She spent hours each day in what appeared to be a laboratory, still searching for a cure to the toxin that made her people living weapons. Sometimes she would stand at the observation windows, staring out at the void with an expression of such loneliness that Jake felt his heart breaking across the vast distance between them. The breakthrough came during his 3rd week of surveillance. Jake's sensors detected unusual energy readings from Vera's laboratory. The patterns were unlike anything in human science, but they reminded him of the electromagnetic signatures his brother's body had produced in the hours before his death. Vera wasn't just studying the toxin. She was experimenting on herself, trying to find a way to neutralize it. That night, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He began plotting a course toward Colony Station Omega, knowing that approaching the Nethari settlement was not just career suicide, but actual suicide. The toxin would kill him within hours of contact. But something in Vera's eyes called to him across the darkness of space, and Jake Morrison had never been one to ignore a call for help. As his ship's engines hummed to life, Jake thought about his brother's final words. "Don't let them suffer alone, Jake. Promise me you won't let them suffer alone." It was a promise he intended to keep, even if it cost him everything. Jake's ship, the Wanderer, slipped through the asteroid field surrounding Colony Station Omega like a ghost in the night. He had disabled all communication systems and painted his hull with sensor-dampening materials stolen from a military depot. If anyone discovered his approach, both he and Vera would face consequences beyond imagination. The station was even more beautiful up close than his long-range sensors had suggested. The Thari architecture flowed like living art, with bioluminescent panels that pulsed in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. Gardens cascaded down the outer walls in impossible waterfalls of color, and the crystalline spires he had observed from afar sang with harmonious frequencies that made his bones vibrate. Beauty couldn't mask the tragedy of the place. This was a prison designed to keep an entire species isolated from the galaxy they had hoped to join. Jake could see Netheri figures moving behind the transparent walls, their purple skin seeming to glow with an inner light. They looked human, enough that their exile felt like a cosmic injustice. Jake's scanner locked onto Vera's laboratory in the station's research sector. She was there, as always, working alone in the sterile white room that had become her personal purgatory. Through the viewport, he could see her hunched over a microscope, her silver hair falling like a curtain around her face. Even from this distance, her dedication was visible in every line of her posture. Landing on the station's docking bay triggered every alarm system the Netheri possessed. Jake had expected this. What he hadn't expected was how quickly Vera would arrive to investigate. She appeared at the bay's entrance within minutes, flanked by 2 male Netheri guards, who looked ready to repel an invasion. But when Vera saw Jake emerging from his ship, her violet eyes went wide with something that looked like wonder mixed with terror. She raised one slender hand, and the guards stepped back reluctantly. Jake could see them arguing with her in their musical language, probably pointing out that his presence violated every treaty between their species. Jake removed his helmet and let it clatter to the deck. The station's atmosphere was breathable. For humans, though it carried the faint scent of flowers he couldn't identify. "My name is Jake Morrison," he called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. "I've come to talk to Dr. Vera Solanthus about her research." Vera stepped forward, and Jake got his first clear look at the being who had haunted his thoughts for weeks. She was smaller than he had expected, barely reaching his shoulder, but there was an otherworldly elegance to her movements that took his breath away. Her skin was the color of twilight skies, marked with intricate silver patterns that seemed to shift and change as she moved. Her hair was like spun starlight, and her eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom and sorrow. "You should not be here, Jake Morrison," she said, and her voice was like music played on instruments that didn't exist. "My touch will kill you. My very presence is poisoning you even now. The toxins we carry are already beginning to work on your system." Jake felt a strange tingling in his fingertips, but he pushed the sensation aside. "I know about the toxin. I watched it kill my brother. But I also know you've been working on a cure. I've been monitoring your laboratory for weeks." The guards moved to flank Jake, but Vera held up her hand again. There was authority in the gesture that made it clear she outranked them despite her youth. "You have been watching me?" she asked, and Jake thought he detected a note of curiosity beneath the concern. "I've been trying to understand you," Jake admitted. "All of you. Humanity thinks you're monsters, but I've seen you in your gardens. I've watched you caring for your children and mourning your dead. You're not monsters. You're prisoners." Vera's silver patterns flared brighter, and Jake realized they were some kind of emotional indicator. "We are both prisoners and monsters, Jake Morrison. We carry death in our very cells. We cannot touch without killing. We cannot love without destroying. This is the curse of our species." Jake took a step closer, and he could see the guards tensing. "But you're working on changing that. Your research. I've seen the energy patterns. You're not just studying the toxin. You're trying to neutralize it. For 3 months I have tried, Vera whispered, and her voice carried the weight of countless failures. Every day I inject myself with new compounds, hoping to find something that will make us safe. But the toxin is woven into our genetic structure. It is part of what makes us Nethery. Jake felt the tingling spreading up his arms now, but he ignored it. What if I told you I have an idea? What if the solution isn't removing the toxin, but changing how human bodies react to it? Vera's laboratory was a marvel of alien science, filled with equipment that hummed with energies Jake couldn't identify. Crystalline computers projected holographic displays showing complex molecular structures, while bioscanners mapped the intricate dance of toxins in Nethery blood. But it was the dedication in Vera's movements that truly amazed him. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who carried the weight of 2 species on her shoulders. "Show me your research," Jake said, settling into a chair that molded itself to his body shape. The Nethery furniture was surprisingly comfortable, designed to accommodate beings who valued both form and function. Vera hesitated, her silver patterns flickering with uncertainty. "Jake Morrison, you have perhaps 30 minutes before the toxin. Concentration in your blood reaches critical levels. We should use this time to get you to a safe distance, not to discuss theoretical science." "I'm not going anywhere," Jake replied firmly. "And call me Jake. We're past the point of formal introductions." The ghost of a smile touched Vera's lips, and Jake felt his heart skip despite the poison coursing through his system. "Very well, Jake, but I warn you, my research has been a series of failures. I have tried everything from genetic therapy to molecular restructuring. The toxin cannot be removed without destroying what makes us Nethery." She activated a holographic display that showed the molecular structure of the Nethery toxin. It was beautiful in its complexity, like a deadly flower made of light and energy. But Jake saw something else in the patterns, something that reminded him of his brother's final hours. "This is where you're wrong," Jake said, pointing to a cluster of molecules near the toxin's core. "You're trying to remove the toxin, but what if you enhanced it instead?" Vera's violet eyes widened. "Enhanced it? Jake, that would make us even more deadly." "Not to Nethery," Jake explained, his mind racing despite the growing weakness in his limbs. "Look at these binding sites. They're designed to interact with human proteins, but they're also incredibly specific. What if we could trigger them to bind with something else first? Something harmless?" Jake's vision was starting to blur, but he forced himself to focus on the molecular display. His brother had been a biochemist before his death, and their long conversations about protein interactions suddenly seemed prophetic. Tom always said that the most dangerous poisons were also the most specific. Change one small thing about their target, and they become harmless. Vera moved closer, her excitement overriding her caution. "You are suggesting we could pre-bind a toxin with synthetic proteins? Create a buffer that would neutralize it before it could affect human physiology?" "Exactly." Jake's voice was getting weaker, but his conviction remained strong. "The toxin isn't evil. It's just doing what evolution designed it to do. But evolution doesn't account for scientific intervention." Vera began pulling up new molecular models, her fingers dancing across interfaces that responded to her touch like living things. "The concept is theoretically sound, but the practical applications ... She paused, studying Jake with new intensity. "Jake, your blood is carrying active toxin right now. If we could synthesize the right binding proteins ... You want to use me as a test subject," Jake said, and despite his weakening condition, he managed to smile. "I was hoping you'd suggest that." "It is incredibly dangerous," Vera warned. "We would be introducing experimental compounds into your bloodstream while you are already in toxic shock. The chances of success are minimal." But they're not zero, Jake pointed out. And if we succeed, we prove that Nethery and humans can coexist. If we fail, he shrugged weakly. Well, I was going to die anyway. Vera's silver patterns were blazing now, cycling through colors Jake didn't have names for. He realized they were seeing her emotional state laid bare, hope warring with fear, scientific excitement battling protective instincts. Jake, I cannot ask you to risk your life for my research. You're not asking, Jake said softly. I'm volunteering. My brother died because nobody understood your people. Maybe I can die making sure nobody else has to. Vera was quiet for a long moment, her alien features unreadable. Then she moved to her equipment banks, her movements taking on the fluid grace of someone who had found purpose. If we do this, I will need to work faster than I have ever worked before. The binding proteins must be synthesized and introduced within the next 15 minutes, or your system will shut down completely. Jake felt a strange peace settling over him as Vera began her preparations. He had come to Colony Station Omega expecting to die, but now he had a chance to die for something meaningful. If their experiment succeeded, it would change everything. If it failed, at least Vera would know that someone had believed in her work enough to stake his life on it. Vera, he said as she prepared the first injection, whatever happens, I want you to know something. I've spent weeks watching you work, and I've never seen anyone fight harder for peace between species. You're not a monster. You're a hero. Vera's hands trembled as she prepared the synthetic binding proteins, her silver patterns flickering between hope and terror. Jake could see his reflection in the polished surfaces of her equipment, skin pale and waxy, eyes dimmed by the toxins. Advance. He had maybe 10 minutes left before his system would shut down completely. The first injection contains modified human albumin proteins, Vera explained, her voice steady despite her obvious anxiety. If my calculations are correct, they should begin binding with the toxin molecules immediately. You will feel a burning sensation as your immune system responds to the foreign proteins. Jake nodded weakly. Do it. The injection felt like liquid fire racing through his veins, but Jake bit back his scream. He had endured worse during his military training, and the stakes here were infinitely higher than any battlefield. Through the burning pain, he could feel something else, a strange tingling that seemed to counteract the toxin's numbing effects. Jake, your cellular readings are changing, Vera said, her voice filled with amazement. The binding proteins are working faster than I projected, but your body temperature is rising dangerously. Keep going, Jake gasped. Whatever happens, keep going. The second injection was even more painful, but Jake could feel strength returning to his limbs. His vision cleared enough to see Vera's face clearly for the first time since the experiment began. Her violet eyes were wide with scientific fascination, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like affection. Jake, I need to monitor your progress closely, Vera said, reaching toward him with one slender hand. But if I touch you now, before the proteins have fully bonded, then you touch me, Jake said simply. Vera, if this doesn't work, I want to know what it feels like to hold your hand before I die. Vera's patterns flared so brightly they illuminated the entire laboratory. Jake, you do not understand. Even if the proteins work, there has never been physical contact between our species. We do not know what other effects there might be. Jake managed to lift his hand toward hers, his fingers shaking with effort. Only one way to find out. Their fingertips met, and the universe exploded. Jake felt energy coursing through him that was unlike anything in human experience. It was as if Vera's touch had awakened every nerve ending in his body, flooding him with sensations that were both alien and familiar. Through their connection, he could feel her emotions directly, her fear, her hope, her desperate longing for contact with another living being. But more than that, he could sense the Netheri toxin in his blood responding to her presence. Instead of causing more damage, it seemed to be transforming, becoming something new and different. The binding proteins weren't just neutralizing the toxin, they were converting it into some kind of bridge between their nervous systems. Vera gasped, her eyes rolling back as she experienced the same overwhelming connection. Jake, what is happening to us? Through their joined hands, Jake could feel Vera's memories flooding his mind. He saw her childhood on a dying world, the desperate journey to find a new home, the heartbreak of realizing her people were too dangerous to live among others. But he also felt her scientific passion, her determination to find a solution, and underneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made his heart ache. "I can feel you," Jake whispered, tightening his grip on her hand. "I can feel everything you've been through." Vera's silver patterns were cycling through every color imaginable, and Jake realized his own skin was beginning to glow with a faint luminescence. "Jake, the toxin is not being neutralized. It is being transformed. We are becoming something new." Jake looked at their joined hands and saw that the change was visible. Where their skin touched, both human and Netheri flesh seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. The sensation was incredible, not just physical touch, but emotional and mental connection that transcended anything either species had ever experienced. "Vera," Jake said, his voice filled with wonder, "I think we just discovered something amazing." But their moment of triumph was interrupted by the sound of alarms throughout the station. Through the laboratory's viewport, Jake could see human warships approaching Colony Station Omega. General Hawthorne had discovered his unauthorized mission, and she was coming to extract him by force. "They will kill you for touching me," Vera said, her patterns flickering with fear. "The treaty is clear. Any human who makes contact with Netheri must be eliminated to prevent contamination." Jake stood, amazed to find his strength had returned. Completely. If anything, he felt better than he had before the toxin exposure. "Then we'll have to show them there's another way." The human warships surrounded Colony Station Omega like predators circling wounded prey. Jake could see General Hawthorne's flagship, the Retribution, taking position directly in front of the station's main docking bay. Her message came through, on all frequencies, cold and uncompromising. "Captain Morrison, you are in violation of the Interspecies Non-Contact Treaty. Surrender yourself immediately for quarantine and termination procedures." Jake looked at Vera, who was standing beside him at the laboratory's main viewport. Her hand was still clasped in his, and the strange luminescence continued to flow between their joined fingers. Whatever the toxin had become, it was creating a bond between them that felt deeper than anything either species had imagined possible. "I'm not surrendering," Jake said into his communicator. "General, I need you to see something. Vera and I have made contact, and we're both alive." "Impossible," came Hawthorne's reply. "Captain Morrison, Netheri toxin kills humans within hours. If you're still alive, it means the contamination is spreading. We cannot allow you to return to human space." Jake felt Vera's fear through their connection, but he also sensed her determination. She moved to her own communication console, her fingers dancing across the alien interface. "General Hawthorne, this is Dr. Vera Solanthus of the Netheri Council. Captain Morrison is correct. We have successfully neutralized the toxin through synthetic protein binding. Physical contact between our species is now possible." "Even if that's true," Hawthorne responded, "the risk is too great. The treaty stands. Both of you will be eliminated to prevent potential contamination." Jake watched through the viewport as the human ships powered their weapons. But something else was happening too. Other Netheri were gathering in the stations. Corridors drawn by news of the successful contact. Jake could see them through the transparent walls, hundreds of purple-skinned figures, moving with purpose toward the laboratory. "Vera, your people are coming," Jake observed. "They want to see proof that the barrier between our species can be broken," Vera replied. "For 3 months, we have lived in isolation, believing we were cursed to be forever alone. If we can prove that contact is possible." The laboratory doors opened, and Vera's people began filing in. Jake had never seen so many Nethari in one place. Their silver patterns were flickering with excitement and hope, creating a symphony of light that filled the room. At their head was an elderly male, whose patterns glowed with the deep blue of authority. "I am Council Elder Theron," he said, his musical voice carrying centuries of wisdom. "Dr. Solanthus, is it true? Has the toxin barrier been broken?" Vera held up her hand that was still joined with Jake's, and the assembled Nethari gasped as one. The luminescence that flowed between human and alien skin was visible proof that something fundamental had changed. "The toxin remains in our systems," Vera explained, "but it has been transformed. Instead of causing death, it creates connection." Elder Theron approached slowly, his patterns shifting to the gold of amazement. May I attempt contact with the human?" Jake extended his free hand, and Theron reached out with trembling fingers. When their skin met, the same explosion of sensation occurred. Jake found himself connected to an ancient mind filled with the accumulated wisdom of Nethari civilization. Through Theron, he could sense the deep sadness of a people who had thought themselves forever cursed to live in isolation. "Extraordinary," Theron whispered. "The human's touch brings not death, but understanding. We can feel each other's thoughts and emotions directly." One by one, other Nethari approached and made contact with Jake. Each touch created a new connection, a bridge between species that allowed for perfect understanding. Jake found himself at the center of a growing network of consciousness that included beings from 2 different worlds. Through the viewport, Jake could see that the human warships were preparing to fire. But he also saw something else. Nethari ships emerging from hidden bays throughout the station. They moved with organic grace, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing, with the same light that flowed between Jake and his new alien friends. "General Hawthorne," Jake called over the communicator, "you need to stand down. What we've discovered here changes everything. Humans and Nethari can not only coexist, we can connect on a level that's never been possible between species." "Captain Morrison," came Hawthorne's strained reply, "I have my orders. The treaty must be enforced." "Then change the treaty," Jake said firmly. "Vera and her people aren't a threat to humanity. They're the key to something incredible. Through physical contact, we can share knowledge, emotions, experiences. We can understand each other completely." Jake felt Vera's hand tighten in his as she addressed the human fleet. "General Hawthorne, my people have spent generations studying your species from afar. We have admired your courage, your innovation, your determination to explore the unknown. We came to your world not as conquerors, but as students. We wanted to learn from you. And now," Elder Theron added, his voice carrying the authority of ages, "we can truly learn from each other. The toxin that once divided us has become the bridge that will unite us." Jake watched as the human ships powered down their weapons. Through the communication system, he could hear heated discussions between Hawthorne and her superiors. The discovery that humans and Nethari could not only survive contact, but thrive because of it, was changing everything. 3 months later, Jake stood in the garden of New Unity Colony, watching human and Nethari children play together in the artificial sunlight. The colony was built on the principles he and Vera had discovered, that physical contact between the species created understanding that transcended language and culture. Vera approached through the flowering pathways, her silver patterns glowing with the deep purple of contentment. She had adapted to life among humans with remarkable grace, just as Jake had learned to appreciate the subtle complexities of Nethari. Society. The Council has approved the next phase of integration, she said, taking his hand in the gesture that had become natural for them. 50 more colonies will be established throughout human space. Jake felt her happiness through their connection, mixed with his own satisfaction at how far they had come. Ton would have been proud, he said softly. His death led to the breakthrough that united our species. Through their joined hands, Jake could sense the vast network of connections that now linked humans and Nethari across the galaxy. Each touch created new understanding. Each contact built bridges that would last for generations. What had begun as a desperate experiment in a laboratory had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization. Jake, Vera said, her patterns flickering with an emotion he had learned to recognize as deep affection. Do you ever regret the choice you made that day? Jake looked around at the thriving colony, at the mixed families and the children who would grow up never knowing the barriers that had once divided their species. Never, he said, lifting their joined hands to his lips and kissing her fingers. Best decision I ever made. As the artificial sun set over New Unity Colony, Jake and Vera walked hand in hand through gardens that bloomed with flowers from 2 worlds. Behind them, the lights of the colony twinkled like stars, each one representing a connection that had been thought impossible just months before. The touch that had once been fatal had become the foundation for a love that would reshape the galaxy.